Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the next edition of Faith and Freedom. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, fans everywhere.
Everywhere.
Joe, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. We had quite a week, actually, or whatever it's been since you and I last got together. 10 days. We're both New Yorkers. Don't hold anything against us for that. But we got a governor that's in peril politically.
Yeah.
And this show is going to be a special show for us. We've got an opportunity to bring a couple of guys onto this show, and I just want to introduce them to our audience. And the first one is Brian Podosic, and the other guest that we have is Tyler Smith. You two guys on with us right now?
We sure are. Yep, I'm here.
Okay, good. And first of all, guys, thanks very much for joining our show today. Let me do just a little bit of an intro. Both Brian and Tyler are college graduates. They both went to Houghton College in the southern part of Western New York. It's a Christian college, and they're both probably in their late 20s, approaching 30, right, guys?
That's right, getting a little too close.
All right, my wife just had, and that's Brian's mother, by the way. Brian's my stepson, and my wife, Brian's mother, just had her last birthday in the 50s. So somehow, some way, I think next year could be a sad birthday year. I'm not too sure, but she's got nothing to tear up about because I did the 50s and 60s a while ago. Right, so I've been through it, and by God's grace, I'm still hanging in there. Once again, guys, thanks for joining us. One of the reasons we wanted you on board today was because you guys, by definition, are both millennials. And incidentally, Joe to my left, to your right watching, is also a millennial, or just
I'm right on the edge. Yeah, I was born in 84, so
84.
I'm like,
is
I'm
83
right
the cutoff?
I think so.
So 83 is the cutoff. But guys, if you want to call Joe a millennial, you can.
We could do that.
He can handle it. He's got thick skin.
I've got my big boy pants on. I can make that work.
So we just want to throw out some of the current events that are taking place, guys, and just get your input from two guys that are well educated, smart, hold jobs, have overall a conservative point of view, and just try to get your understanding, representing your age group on how you take what's going on. So first thing that I want to make sure we're all on the same page with, and that is, if we're going to talk about cancel culture or being woke, what do you guys? I want to get you guys to tell us, what's the definition of cancel culture as you understand it?
Yeah, Tyler, you want to go ahead?
Oh, sure, yeah. So I guess starting with cancel culture, I would say that's kind of this cultural undercurrent right now, where we have this assumption that there's a certain way that you're supposed to be in the public life, and you're supposed to emulate certain liberal left-wing principles on the way you talk about race, the way you talk about economics. And cancel culture is this attitude where if you don't fit that characteristic, if you don't fit into that mold, then you really don't deserve to have a public platform at all, and you need to be canceled. You need to be shut down so people aren't exposed to your dangerous worldview.
I think that's spot on.
I do too. Brian, do you have anything to add to that? Because I think that's right. Hit the bullseye.
Yeah, I don't think I could have said it much better there. So I totally agree.
All right, and one thing that Tyler, one thing that you included in your definition was that if I'm not putting words in your mouth, is that this is really kind of a liberal or left-wing approach to canceling people that don't share their opinion. Did I hear you correctly?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay, would either one of you guys say that also exists from the right-wing or conservative point of view out there? Do you see any of that taking place in that, and if we reverse it?
I'll say personally, I do see that sometimes. I think that Christians and conservatives can be, I don't think it's the same kind of level of virulence that you see from the left, but I think we have our own version of it sometimes. You know, if somebody says something that we think is a little bit edgy, pushing the liberal side of things, then we can shut them down. I mean, we do this to Christian speakers who go a little bit outside of the conservative space that we think they should belong in, and they start going a little bit off in the bushes. Then we'll say, I don't want to hear anything more from them. So I think it exists, but it's definitely not. I mean, the cultural power right now is with the left, right? So they have the power to do this stuff in a way that conservatives just don't. So we see it a lot more aggressively from that side.
Right. So you would, I would agree with that, but I would say that it's certainly not as pervasive as it is from left out there to the rest of us, because we, as you stated, we just don't have the press siding with us in too many cases. So what we do winds up being in a much more narrow sense than it does.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's interesting too that in your definition you kind of included the word safety, or what, and that, I think that's interesting. That's kind of the vein that you see it, and I agree with you. I don't know if I ever put that word safety in cancel culture, but that is the idea, right? If your idea is so vastly different than that of the left or somebody who's more on the liberal side of things, and now your ideas and your opinions put others in danger, quote unquote, danger. I think that's very interesting, and I actually think that's very insightful.
So Brian, maybe I'll throw this question your way. What do you think is the purpose of cancel culture? What do you think the end game is by canceling out those that don't agree with you? I mean, just what do you think it is?
Well, I mean, I think the end game for when we're talking about it on the liberal side is that they are really just pushing their agenda and trying to make sure that really their opinion is the only opinion that the public is seeing, and the only opinion what they're hoping is that the public agrees with that opinion, obviously, as well. And I guess, if that's the only opinion out there, that's the only one you're going to have an option to agree with, or at least certainly that's what their hope would be. So that's kind of how I see their end goal being, at least from what I'm looking at.
Yeah, I think there's an idea, or maybe it's more of like a social kind of psychological aspect to it, where because that is the mainstream pervasive idea, for you to go against it kind of pushes you into these outskirts, and these, like, you're kind of like the one that's singled out. And as humans, nobody wants to be in a group all by themselves. They want to be a part of the collective, if you will, and that's kind of also the tactic that they use. If you're outside of the quote unquote normal realm of thinking, now you're some outsider, somebody who's right on the fringes, and I think you see that in even the way that they label or had labeled like Trump supporters, right? It was always the radical right or the far
Sure.
right, and so you want to cancel the far right because they're that far out there, and so yeah.
Joe, I think that's a great point, because as human beings, we do want to belong.
Yeah,
right?
we want a sense of belonging.
Right.
Right.
We don't want to be
Community.
ostracized. We don't want to be on the outside looking in. I think that enters into our thought process in witnessing for the Lord
Sure.
Jesus Christ.
Sure,
right?
of course.
Is this person? I'm kind of friends with this person. If I say this about Jesus or that about some other scripture, are they going to reject me? Are they going to, even though it's a one-on-one thing, are they going to cancel me out from them? And so we, wrongly so, we pull back and we say, we just don't want to get into that position, and so we stay silent. I agree with you, Brian. I think that's the reason. Now, how do you guys, your age group, or you personally, either way, how do you see this interfering with freedom of speech, which is recognized in the Constitution as part of the First Amendment? And remember this, that the rights we have in the Constitution are just that. They're the framers of the Constitution said, these are things that the government does not give you, nor can they take away. All right? These are rights given to us by Almighty God, and the government, speaking of the federal government, because it's the U.S. Constitution, they don't have any right whatsoever to cancel us out. So if it's an individual doing some canceling, like I don't want to talk to you anymore because I don't agree with your faith or I don't agree with your stance, that's one thing. But when the government, no matter what it is, whether it's city, county, state, or federal, when they start doing these things, they are usurping the Constitution and kind of pulling back. Not kind of, they're pulling back on the freedom of speech. But that's my opinion. How do you guys see it?
So
I
I,
think.
so
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Brian. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, so I was just going to say, I think what you just said, I couldn't agree more. I think the main problem with cancel culture is freedom of speech and well, the lack thereof. I mean, you look at the example of of Dr. Seuss being canceled and so on, with some of the books that he wrote, and so now we're not only talking about freedom of speech for us today, but we're going back to someone who wrote books, so many years ago, and now, canceling him because of, some of the things, in his personal life and perhaps, some of the things in the books based on the opinions of others. So yeah, so now we're not only talking about freedom of speech for us in our world today, but the people of the past, and things that were written in books that we basically have deemed acceptable for years and years, and now it just recently hits the news, and now it's somehow no longer acceptable. So yeah, I think freedom of speech is the main issue with it, and I think we're just going down kind of a scary path.
I agree. I think that when you start to kind of restrict the freedom of speech, you ultimately have a lock on all ideological positions, right? If I say it's correct for everybody to have, I'll just use an example, healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
Healthcare is a human right, and if I say, well, I want to, okay, healthcare is something that's afforded to you, right? Something that you can earn, something that you can get. Well, that's your opinion. That's a dangerous opinion. Now it's just we're not going to listen to you. You're canceled. Where's the argument? How could we discuss the pros and the cons of something like that? How could we actually have a dialogue and come to a position of understanding with each other if one side is canceled and the other side is just always right? And it leads to a dangerous path as well. Who determines what's always right, and what happens when that turns on you, right?
And that's 100% correct, Joe. Who determines what's right? And in our in the culture we're in right now, we've got maybe not a majority, but we got a lot of people that think the government is the entity that should determine what's right.
Sure.
As a matter of fact, part of HR1, which has passed the House and is going to go to the Senate for debate, hopefully won't get through the Senate. They want to set up a council of people that they choose, right? That they choose, and incidentally, faith will become one of the denominators, if you will, as to whether or not you're able to sit on this. So they'll be able to say, well, you know what, you're Christian or you're this. We don't want you to sit on this, even though in all other respects you're a great citizen. So the government is going to make the decision as to what you say and what you can't say. I can't believe that it will ever pass constitutional muster if this thing gets passed, but you don't know.
Yeah, at this
You don't
point,
know.
who knows?
We've got our Supreme Court. I've said it before. There are 9 people in black robes that we put so much faith in, and we're crazy to do that, right?
We even talked about maybe a month or two ago, we talked about the truth czar. Remember that?
Absolutely. Biden wants a truth czar.
Right.
He or she will make a decision as to whether or not this can be rebroadcast or you can say it or whatever. It's crazy. So just before we get off this, I don't know if you guys know this, incidentally, to our viewers, both Tyler and Brian live in Massachusetts, and I just read this article this morning regarding canceling somebody out. There is an ice cream, a relatively popular and well-known ice cream store. It's not Ben and Jerry's. It's called Brigham's Ice Cream. It's a New England brand, started in 1914, and when you put sprinkles on a cone or on a dish, some people call them jimmies. Some people call them sprinkles. Apparently, up in New England, they've been jimmies for a long time. Sometimes they're multicolored. Sometimes they're brown. Well, these guys use brown jimmies, and they want to they just want to cancel all of these jimmies because they're brown. And somebody out there said, "Well, that's racist."
You're kidding me.
I'm not kidding you. Here's the article right here. I just printed the thing out. It's absolutely unbelievable. The guy ends the article by saying, "Are they, meaning those that are offended, are they really offended over a brown colored sprinkle? My goodness, what have we become that we as a nation are so soft that sprinkles offend us?"
I was going to say they're soft. That's what they are. What the heck?
So, I mean, where does this all end? Now, my follow-up or my last question, and Joe might have some for you guys. Where do you guys, again, this could be personally or this could represent your age group as millennials. At what point will you guys take a stand, if at all, against cancel culture? Does it have to touch you personally, or if it would you do something positive? Would you take action, or maybe you have already prior to it actually touching you?
Bob, that was going to be my question. So,
was it?
Yeah, that's a
Okay.
great question. I love it.
Silence. I hear crickets, Joe. I hear crickets.
That's a tough question, because I mean, we have to keep in mind, right? I mean, it's one thing to say that we're opposed to government censorship, but I think the thing we got to keep in mind is that cancel culture really is a great term because it's a cultural phenomenon. It's about individuals. It's about private groups making these determinations. I mean, our whole communication sphere right now is online, right? I mean, everything is filtered through the online lens, and most of these online companies, we have giant corporations that are managing and filtering the media that we consume, and it's these companies that are making these determinations. They have maybe a few individuals, a pocket group, or a big company that says they're going to censor such and such information or opinion. It's not necessarily the government that's doing it. So we have really it's a whole community of people, half the country, you could say, that believes in that free speech is for me and not for thee. And so I think when you ask about taking a stand, it's hard, because you think, on one hand, I just kind of want to, I'll be honest, I just want to keep my head down to a certain extent. I don't want to deal with this, so I'll keep some of my more conservative opinions. I'll keep them to myself because I don't want to deal with that. But I mean, you can only do that for so long, right? Eventually it gets to everybody. So I mean, I don't have a good answer for you. I think it's really hard to think about, like, wow, what do I do to keep this from taking over the whole country?
Yeah, so Tyler, let me ask you this. So we're gonna put this discussion up on YouTube. YouTube is a private company, but they're a platform, right? They're just allowing free speech to go forth on their platform. By law, they're not supposed to take anything down that doesn't disagree with their terms of service, or if you will. But they take this episode down, right? Because our opinions and our discussion kind of falls out of the mainstream of what society says right now. Is that something that would be a problem for you? Do you fight for that? Do you just say, hey, that video got taken down? What about that? I mean, it could touch us directly. And then I guess as far as the stance on your kind of government, I think government is involved in it in a way by allowing it to happen, right? I mean, if a lawsuit comes against Twitter or Facebook or YouTube, kind of like, I don't know if you're probably familiar with Steven Crowder. If you listen to him at all, he's been demonetized, he's been censored, he's had his account taken down. We've seen it happen with Donald Trump, where his Twitter account gets permanently disabled. Things like that. It is happening in the upper levels of government, and when you look at that versus the Constitution, and these platforms that are just seemingly censoring people like Donald Trump or Steven Crowder, but letting the Ayatollah of Iran just rant on and on about hatred for the Jews and destroying the Jews. I think that it is government sanctioned canceling, if you will.
Well, that's a good point. That's a good point. And I think if, for example, this episode was taken down, I mean, I think I'd have limited recourse, but I'd probably say write about it on Facebook. I'd probably put that out there, like say, hey, because I mean, for me, that'd be very personal. I'd be like, wow, like this seems really aggressive.
Right,
I
four
would definitely
people
have
having
something
a
to say about
conversation about, about the culture, and it seems it's too dangerous for other people to hear.
it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, fortunately on that specific account, if YouTube shuts us down, we have at least one other venue, and that's Rumble,
Sure.
right? Where Rumble is not so partisan. But Tyler, I think you made some good points, and you're not in a short line, right?
No.
There's a lot of conservatives that either are sticking their head in the sand, saying, I can't listen to this anymore. This news is too depressing. There's nothing I can do about it as an individual. I'm just going to go about my life. I'm going to worship the way I want to worship. I'm going to work hard at my job. I'm going to love my wife and be a good citizen and all that kind of stuff. And just the rest of this cancel culture, woke kind of stuff. I know what's going on. I'll pray about it, but that's as far as I'm going to do. You're not in a short line with that, right?
Oh, and I think there's got to be a balance to it too, right? I mean, as Christians and as I mean, we're citizens of a country too, and I think we have a responsibility to be a part of that dialogue, But I agree. There's a balance to it. Yeah, I don't think you want to go over the top and just say, I'm not going to do anything about it. I don't think that as Christians, it's necessarily our place to be all in crazy government conspiracy. There's got to be a balance of trusting in the Lord and fighting for what's right.
Right. And we do have that responsibility.
Sure.
Right. I mean, we can't just be actionless Christians
Right.
when things are happening against either us or, those that are being abused.
Sure.
Right. Whether it's physical abuse or anything, right?
Yeah.
Verbal abuse, whatever it is, we're supposed to stand for what's right according to the Word of God. Brian, do you have anything to add to what Tyler said? Same question.
Yeah, of course. So first off, let me just get back to the sprinkles there for a second. That story is just absolutely ridiculous. I can't even believe that would that would be something in the news. But I guess the scary part about that is that there are actually, so many people that actually believe or buy into that sort of thinking. So that's kind of the scary part for me. As far as actually doing something about it, I'll be totally honest as well. Typically with things like that, I am much more likely to get involved when it affects me personally. So, if I see these types of things in the news, as you mentioned, Joe, about our president being banned from Twitter, I'll look at it. I'll think it's absolutely ridiculous. I might even, post some comments on Facebook, saying that it's, outrageous or whatnot like that. But as far as more actual action, that we're kind of talking about, I'm probably more likely to get involved if it was something that affected me personally, such as this video being taken down. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. But the more and more that I see, this insanity, the more it makes me want to get involved in something, and just really fight for our freedoms, really.
It does almost seem like kind of a David and Goliath fight. Right. I mean, and there's no doubt about it. And
Yeah.
I think I do understand, that kind of a, vantage point too. What can I do against Twitter? What can I do against the federal government, who unlimited resources, who could destroy me? You know what I mean? And it's like, okay, here I am, one guy, just kind of average, I don't have resources to fight the federal
Right.
government. How
Can't
do I
do
do
it.
that? What do I do? And so it could seemingly be like an impossible task. I do think that as more people come together to stand up against it, it becomes more of a doable task. And the reality is we we attack these ideas and promote our values at the polls, right? Voting and who we have in government, and I think that's where it's most important.
You're right. I mean, that's the number, after prayer, which I believe is the most powerful thing that we can do. I think second after that is making sure that we get to the voting booth, right?
Yeah.
And vote according to our beliefs and the way we want this country to go. Right now, for whatever reason, the Lord has allowed the Democrats to have the House and the executive branch of the federal government, as well as a tie in the Senate, and so things could very well. Only he knows why he's allowing to happen. But we just have to continue to pray. And I don't want to ask you guys how often you are praying for our nation. If you want to tell us, you can. But I do find myself working my way back to 2 Chronicles 7:14 so often, and I think from my perspective, I think the most important thing we can do in trying to right the wrong path that this nation is on is to pray, because everyone on this call and everyone watching this show knows that we as individuals, even as small groups, probably can't change the direction that this nation is heading in, and it's a 737 with no power, 30,000 feet in the air. It's falling rapidly, and it's going to crash, and the crash is going to be horrendous. But that passage in the Old Testament says this. Now, God is speaking to Israel. He's not speaking to the United States in that passage. The United States didn't exist, right, as a nation back then. But because he's the same yesterday, today, and forever, I believe that the precept stands correct for every nation that has had lines drawn to create its geographic boundaries is true with, and that's this: if my people, and that's everybody on this phone call is a born again Christian, and so when he says if my people is everybody on this call. It's everybody that's been saved by grace. If my people will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, that's what he's calling us to do. He's calling us to be humble. He's calling us to pray, reach out to him in prayer. He's calling us to seek his face. I think in part that means get into the word, understand what he wants from his people, understand him more, learn more about him so we can praise him more, adore him more, and thank him more, and then turn from our wicked ways. And we have this, as Tyler brought up way back in the beginning of the show. He said, he goes, I think that we do some of this cancel stuff with Christians that speak, and we don't totally agree with what they say, and so we kind of say, okay, that guy's now out of bounds. I'm not gonna listen to him anymore. But what this passage is saying is, I want you to look inwardly. I want you to look at yourself. And we like to think, well, if I compare myself to the left, to the Democrats, to the socialists, hey, I'm pretty good compared to them with regard to my, standing before God. And that's all hogwash, right? Because we're all sinners. We sin every day. And what we like to do is point it out in somebody else. We don't like to look at ourselves, right? So, David says in the Psalms, he said, search me and try me. And if you find, he's talking to God, and if you find any wicked way in me, tell me about it. Show me the way to everlasting, right? Which for us post-cross on Calvary is run to Jesus, repent of your sins, ask for forgiveness. He cleanses you. You stand up. You're in his light, and off we go. We don't do that enough as his children. We just don't do that enough. But if we do those four things, here's his promise back to us. It was his promise to Israel, but again, I'm going to say I believe it. The precept is true for any nation. He says, if you do those things, here's his promise. This is his guarantee. I will hear from heaven. We don't have to worry about our prayers stopping at the ceiling. I will hear from heaven. I will heal your land, and I will forgive your sins. Bingo. That's one verse, 2 Chronicles 7:14, for a Christian that is a citizen of the United States of America. Do you need to say any more?
No,
That's
yeah,
everything we want.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's everything we want, right? And we don't know how God is going to heal the land. Will it be a revival, right? We just don't know how he'll do it, but I trust and believe in my God, and he will respond accordingly if we'll do these things. And so there's much we can do. And I think one of the things we need to do, if we're not bringing our nation and our problems, you know, of the direction this nation is going, if we're not bringing those to him each and every day, asking him for continued long suffering, which we don't deserve, asking him for more mercy, which we don't deserve, then we're shirking our responsibility as U.S. citizens.
Sure.
Right? And we're shirking our responsibility. The God of this universe, who wants the commandments and precepts in his Bible to be obeyed, right, so the nation can flourish. He says that sin is a reproach to any nation, right? Sin is a reproach to any nation, and so we need to understand that and move forward accordingly as we're on our knees, either figuratively or literally before him on a daily basis. And so, again, for everybody watching this show, you might find a disagreement in the fact that God didn't say that to the U.S. Okay, then you still need to go before the Lord in prayer and lift this nation up, because it's in the toilet and the handle's about 99% pulled down to flush us away. Guys, do you have anything else that you'd like to add? Joe, Brian, Tyler?
All right.
I'm going to take that as a no. All right, guys. So let's move on to woke. What does it mean to be woke in our society?
So from what I understand, it essentially being woke, I typically think of younger generations, millennials or Gen Z, and basically being culturally aware of what's going on, and particularly of any injustices that are going on.
Yeah, I would add to that. It's like kind of having this. It's sort of like, I think it's supposed to call back a little bit to the Matrix concept of like you are aware suddenly of a world full of injustice, a world full of slights and racism and sexism and homophobia and on, all the different things, and it's like you've entered this enlightened state where you can see it where nobody else really can, or at least the more conservative people can't see it.
So and Brian, you actually, maybe both of you guys touched on this, Brian for sure, and that is that the injustices you're talking about that a woke individual would be aware of. What type of injustices would you be talking about? Are you talking about in our society now? Are you talking about an injustice toward churches? Are you talking about an injustice toward Christians, an injustice toward blacks, an injustice toward Jews? Who determines, or if you're woke, what injustices are woke people in our culture hip to?
Well, so I would say it's typically going to be the ones that Tyler started to mention there, about racism, about homophobia. So it's mostly looking, at least from what I've seen, at minorities, individuals, such as you mentioned, as blacks, or as gays, or different groups like that. That are being affected the most, in the opinions of the woke individuals.
Yeah, there's a perception, a sort of a framework for this kind of thinking called intersectionality, which is the idea that all of the supposed injustices against racial groups, sexual minorities, etc., they're all linked, and that you have to see one as connected to the other. So if police brutality is a problem, well, we got to think about police brutality in terms of how it affects the transgender population, how it affects black people, and we have to kind of rank them in terms of their the level of privilege afforded to people and the level of harm that's affecting them. And it's kind of like you end up blocking all these people and all these groups into one sort of category of victimhood, and then it's just a matter of ranking their level of victimhood.
But every victim is going to think they should be number one, right?
Oh yeah, you got to compete, because top spot for victim is top spot for the woke ideology.
So without I mean, the only way to ultimately bring justice is we've got to come back to Christ and what he calls what he calls his children to do, if we don't do that, which we are not doing in this nation, then injustice, which is around us, I don't think there's much question about that. When you push it back to the government, since the government cannot be a spiritual savior, the culture looks at government and says, well, the only way you, or at least the primary way in which you can be a savior to those that have experienced injustice is we've got to make an unlevel playing field, and maybe that's money, maybe that's increased opportunity to set the one that's gone through the injustice, give them an easier path to the next step or whatever. But it usually, the answer is usually money. And that's why, we're looking at California as an example, as a state that is debating giving reparations to every black person that lives in California for the injustices that were done 250 years ago or so.
Yeah, I think that's the only thing that the government has to offer, really, right? I mean, what else could the government really give you other than money?
Right. They have two things they can do. On the plus side, they can give you money. On the negative side, those that committed the injustice or those that won't agree with that injustice having been committed, they can silence you, right?
Sure.
And that might be jail. You don't know what that might be,
Sure.
but they, as you said earlier, Joe, it's impossible, humanly speaking, it's impossible to fight the government.
Yeah,
They're
and
just too powerful.
And unfortunately, the reality is, if there is hurt, right? Let's just take like the African American community at this point. If there's hurt from past injustices done by the United States, is money going to fix it? Like, is giving a group of people a sum of money, does that fix the true hurt of whatever injustice happened in the past?
Yeah,
Does it go away?
let me answer that this way, because I'm not a minority, but
Yeah.
let me answer it this way. So let's say you're an individual that had a business shut down because of COVID. And I love that comment by Kristi Noem when she was at CPAC, and she said it wasn't COVID that shut this nation down; it was government,
Yeah.
right? So let's say that I'm an entrepreneur and I had a thriving business, and my Governor Cuomo in New York State said, I'm not essential. You need to stay home, and I'll let you know when you can go back to work. And so 6, 8, 10 months later, whatever it might be, he says, okay, I'm going to let you open up again, but if I'm a restaurant owner, you can have 10% of your, the occupancy rating of your building occupied, or maybe it goes up to 25%, whatever it is. And I can't make it with those types of customers coming in that quantity. So what happens is the government says, oh, look, they're not blaming themselves, but they say, look, we know COVID really hammered you, right? Here comes a $1,400 check. We gave you a $600 earlier. Here comes a $1,400 check. Does that make my pain go away, that I no longer can support my family? Right? It doesn't.
Exactly.
It's worth it. You'd have to give me the equivalent of all the money that I would have ever have earned, and then I'm still ticked off at you for shutting me down.
Right. And so now you have a group of people, right, who and I'm not disagreeing, dignity was taken away from people, right?
Depression.
Personhood was taken away from people. How do you give that back financially? You can't.
You can't do it.
You can't do it. So how could this be the way? It's just and that's all the government is able to give.
Right.
That's all that they're able to give, and it doesn't fix a problem. It doesn't fix a problem.
You guys on this call don't know this, but probably 6 or 8 weeks ago, we had Joe's daughter, Grace, on this show, and he asked her, how did you like the school being shut down and you had to do learning from home? And she said in her just in the beauty of opening her heart
a little
to
10-year-old girl,
a little 10-year-old girl, she said, well, in the beginning, I and I'm paraphrasing, she said it much better because it's her feelings, but she said, in the beginning, I liked it. It was really kind of cool that school was closed. And Joe asked her, well, did that attitude change? And here's what she said. She said, it turned out to be the worst thing that ever happened to me in my whole life.
Yeah.
Right now, hopefully that is a short-term thing, right?
Sure.
And she's back at school now, praise God for that. And hopefully that's a past experience that she might be able to, use sometime later in her life to help somebody else out, but it hasn't left any scars. But no money's going to change the way she felt through this.
Exactly.
Right? No
Exactly.
money. Say,
Right.
here, Grace, here's $3,000, right? Get better.
Right.
It doesn't work.
So here's what I think the reality of being woke is. It's a way to feel better about yourself if you feel that other people have been wronged. Because now you could say, I'm woke, so I'm going to put others ahead of myself. I'm going to put myself down on the totem pole and elevate them. Therefore, I'm a better person now.
What do you think, guys?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's virtue signaling. It's a way of kind of protecting your own mental state and your own sense of how you're. I mean, I think of it in terms of, we always hear about the black people, for example. Let's just take that, are told, you can't make it in society. There's always going to be racism and this whole cultural pull down on you, keeping you from achieving your full potential. And that's what a lot of people are told, and that's what the culture also tells to these other various minority groups. But I mean, that's so self-defeating, and it makes, I think it makes white liberals feel better about themselves, that they perceive this, that they see the supposed injustice, and they can kind of feel better about the fact just by recognizing it and having this opinion. But what it really does is it harms those groups, because when you tell any person you'll never get ahead, that societal forces are always going to hold you back, all you're doing is you're cutting down that person's ability to actually get ahead, because you're telling them, why try?
Yeah, with the exception of very few that are very strong, that when you say to them, you
Sure.
can't do that, right? You just can't do it. Society's against you, country's against you, your boss is against you, and they say, oh yeah, watch me.
Right.
But they're
Right.
in the vast minority,
Sure.
right? That's not the majority of the human population. Brian, you
For
got
sure.
anything to add to that?
No, I totally agree with what Tyler said. I mean, I have seen, obviously, both Tyler and I have a lot of friends, on Facebook that are our own age. And, whenever we see a lot of these posts, that is the exact attitude in the post that Tyler is describing, is that they just feel like they are going to battle for the minorities. They're a social justice warrior. And what it really does, what their attitude really is making them feel better about themselves, I think, in the long run. So yeah, I don't know. So, some of the posts that I see are kind of troubling to see and so on. But that is the overwhelming attitude that I see in the posts on social media.
So my question to the two of you, in your social circles, are these topics things that are discussed? Do you guys talk about it? Do you have, I mean, is it anything that's kind of on the forefront of your, of your conversation, or is it something that's just kind of, you all know that you would kind of agree on cancel culture and being woke is a little on the, I don't know, overly nutty side, and so it's like, we just think that it's kind of crazy, we don't really get into it. Is this something you guys talk about? What is it like in your day to day?
So I guess I would say is I don't see it on a daily basis all the time, but what I'll normally see is whenever there's a current event, is when it'll show the most impact on social media. Like just taking, for example, I know this isn't exactly cancel culture, but when there was George Floyd was murdered, that was all over social media, and that was like a cause that a lot of people in my generation were willing to go out and post about. But so it's not like a daily conversation. However, I do see certain things that'll pop up. So I have one friend on Facebook who tends to lean pretty liberal, and he just posted a few weeks ago something about Dr. Seuss. I know I brought that up earlier, but he had posted something about that basically saying that he thought it was ridiculous. And that was kind of surprising to me. It stood out to me, and in fact, I even liked his post, because I would have thought that he would have been on the other side of that. So there is some discussion, on Facebook that I see, but usually, to answer your question, it's mostly going to be whenever there's something big that's happening, when it actually comes out on social media.
Yeah, I tend to be maybe on the more proactive side of that type of conversation. I mean, if we want to stick with the kind of George Floyd example, all that goes down this summer. There's a large BLM rally that ends up taking place in Rochester, and a coworker of mine invites me to go with him to a BLM rally. Now, I am not typically somebody that would go and participate in any kind of a protest or demonstration or whatever, but because I care about this guy, I told him I will go. I want to march with you. I want to support you as a friend. He's a African American friend of mine. His name's Ali, and incidentally, he's expressed interest in coming on this show, and I'd love to have that happen. So I go with him, and to be fair, I think that I learned a lot about what I perceived a rally like that to be and what it actually was. I think that there was some parts of it that I definitely disagreed with. There were some parts that I found really encouraging, if even to say that. All that to be said, what that led into for the two of us was more opportunity to have conversation, and to actually move past the polarized version of the conversation and get somewhere where we could have more deep and meaningful communication. And I think that is being lost in our culture, the ability to come together, two opposing sides or sides that disagree, to be able to have a meaningful conversation from two different points of view, and trying to understand and trying to come together, and trying to work through issues instead of throwing titles and names and money at a situation, actually getting to a resolved point.
Well, you've just described the antithesis to the
Cancel culture. Right, exactly.
Because you can't have a dialogue.
And that's I think that's the underlying strategy of cancel culture. You know what I mean? I think that the liberal left doesn't want to have the conversation. I think that they want to control the conversation to push an agenda. And I think that if real conversations were had, their agenda would not go forward. It would be something more in the middle, and that's what they don't want.
Yeah.
Well, right. It's no longer okay to disagree, basically.
Right. Exactly. Disagreement, and that brings us back to the whole idea of the First Amendment. And this is, again, something that we've talked about on the show. The freedom to assemble, the freedom of speech. It's really the freedom to disagree, right?
Yeah,
That's what it is.
Right.
It's the freedom to disagree and have two opposing views, or three opposing views, or however many opposing views, but so that the dialogue could be had and a consensus could be made on rational ideas. And in cancel culture prevents that from happening, and that it's a downfall. I've said it. I'll say it again. I think that's the downfall of the country right now. Is to take away the ability to have a conversation and reach a conclusion with the other side.
Well, I think it seems pretty unlikely to change, because we have to think, right? We have a government that's made up largely of liberals. I mean, it just makes sense, right? We have more liberals in government, so there's people in there. We've got the corporations that manage speech, the Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, anybody that's got a hand, Reddit even, companies that have some control over social media speech, they tend to lean left, and they're in favor of cancel culture. So, I mean, it sounds to me like the solution would be for government to create laws that would require the big platforms to allow, broad speech, but it doesn't seem like it's in their interest to do so. So I don't see this really improving from a from a societal standpoint unless there's a cultural shift.
So do you see? I don't think we're going to be at the status quo. I think this has got to move in one direction or another, Tyler. So it's going to get worse. Would you agree?
I broadly, yeah. I don't try to be pessimistic, but I do think it's going to get worse.
And I agree with you. I do think it's going to get worse. I mean, the thing that's sad to me is if you don't have a liberal point of view in a college or a university, for the most part, in the United States of America, there's certainly exceptions, then you've either got 10 square feet on the campus where you can proclaim your beliefs, or maybe you don't have any space at all to proclaim your beliefs. And there was just a Supreme Court decision made for a gentleman that about 4 years ago was told by, and I don't remember what university this was. I think it was on the East Coast somewhere, but it was not an Ivy League school, and he was preaching the gospel, and the campus cops came by and said, you can't do it, and he said, yes, I can. They said, no, you can't, and off he went. He was muted, and the Supreme Court, in an 8-1 decision. Now the school had changed their position in between the time when they grabbed him by the scruff of the neck and said, you can't do this, and I mean that figuratively, not literally. They had changed their position and said, no, you can do this. But he continued the court case, got to the Supreme Court, and in an 8-1 decision, the Supreme Court said, yes, your rights were violated, your freedom of speech, and you have the right to do that. Now, why wasn't the decision 9-0 at the Supreme Court? Well, the guy that we call Chief Justice, he's the chief jester in my book, Roberts, did not vote on that for some technical reason, which I read and can't read back to you or tell you what it said because I didn't understand it. It was legalese up and down. But nevertheless, the colleges and the universities, when you look at the word university, the diversity part comes from diversity, and the uni obviously means one. So the idea of a college or a university is to bring in all sorts of diverse opinions and ideas and talk about them and mull over them, discuss them, and work through them in a rational way so that each individual has an opportunity to logically and critically think about somebody else's understanding, beliefs, or comments. It's been wiped out.
Sure, yeah. We see people who will be going to a college campus to speak, and then all of a sudden their permit will be taken away, or they won't be granted access to a certain auditorium or hall, or even if they are, the fire alarms are pulled, and and it's just like the diversity is gone.
The diversity's gone. That is a death knell to any nation.
Sure.
It just is. You're going to wind up with one point of view that's going to be acceptable, and that point of view is what the government says is the only point of view. And you might as well look at Russia, China, North Korea, Cambodia years ago. It's like if you disagree with the government, look at China today. Mm-hmm. You can't disagree with the government. And if your voice becomes heard, you wind up being taken away. And I honestly do see if this continues in this direction, I see it coming to that. I see it coming to the fact. Look, we've already got pastors that are being shut down for saying the truth out of the Bible. We've got a pastor that was recently jailed. Now, this happens to be in Canada, but he was not going to walk away from the truth of the Word of God. And they told him, you can't have more than whatever Canada said you could have in your congregation. Let's just pick a number and say it's 25%. And he said, I'm not closing the doors to anybody that wants to hear the Word of God. And they said, yes, you will. And he said, no, I won't. And he's in jail. All right, he's in jail because he broke the public health order in Canada. And we know that there is a Calvary Chapel Church, I think, in San Jose, California. They have $1 million worth of fines right now because that pastor won't shut down. And so they just keep tacking on the fines and tacking on the fines. And, we look at it on the East Coast of the United States and say, gee, that's too bad, but oh, well, it doesn't affect me. Well, wait, right? Wait. And here's the other thing. We are trying to cancel the education community in the United States of America is trying to cancel our history, and it's trying to cancel the history of the world. If you go back to World War II, pre-World War II, and then in the beginning of World War II, if you go into Nazi Germany, there were those that actually pastored Christian churches, and they started to hear about Jews being taken away and their businesses being destroyed and that type of stuff. And they were like, "Gee, it's not right, but it doesn't affect me."
Right.
And then there would be a Protestant denomination that would be affected, and they'd say, "Gee, that's not right, but it didn't affect me." And it would go on, and finally, this pastor, if you will, that I think he wrote a book. He said finally, when they came to attack me, because we had done nothing, there was no one left to come to our aid.
Sure.
And guys, if we don't know our history, we are doomed to repeat it. And history's got so many black spots on it. We got to make sure that we understand history and that we do our part to make sure that doesn't happen to this nation that at one time was a great nation and in many respects a light to the world, and that light is becoming dimmer and dimmer and dimmer, and our greatness is becoming less and less because we've tossed God aside. I want to, we want to let you guys go, but I do have one or two more questions. If you guys got a couple more minutes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great. So there's a headline that is from March 13th, so that's yesterday, that says YouTube blacklists 30,000 videos it claims are coronavirus vaccine misinformation. When you hear that headline, what are your initial thoughts? Just your initial thoughts. You read that headline, what do you think?
I'll say
Yeah, go
my
on.
initial thought is like that's a lot of videos. That's a huge number to be blacked out. I can't imagine that they're all super influential or making a huge impact. And they certainly all can't be true disinformation or misinformation. That sounds like a very aggressive move on the part of YouTube.
So, Brian, before I get your input, I got a follow-up for Tyler. So if this headline was YouTube blacklists 3 videos it claims are coronavirus vaccine misinformation, would you be okay with that?
That's interesting. I think on the one hand, I might initially think, whatever, maybe it's really bad. Maybe it's just clear lies and we're actually better off not having that, shot out to the public. But then I might think, if it's only 3, then it's probably 3 that are very large, very influential, and shutting down those kind of voices actually could be really harmful. So I think I would kind of have those 2 different thoughts competing at that.
So let me tell you where I'm at on this thing, just so you have the input from an old man, right? So I look at this and I say, well, if this were the government doing it, or this were some government sanctioned entity doing it, and let's just say that they were outright lies, I would be pounding the desk saying, take it off, the government's lying to you. But if these are just normal people, and I haven't read the article, that's just the headlines, but I'm going to go into the presumption that these are guys like you and me, that maybe your mother got the vaccine and she got sick after she got the vaccine, and YouTube, an informational service company, decides that what you wrote is not worthy to be heard by anybody that subscribes to their process. And my thought on that is, I don't care if it's 1, 3, 330,000, or 300,000, those people should be heard. Let the hearer make the determination as to whether or not they want to believe the truthfulness of this. I don't want a third party involved in a conversation to say, I'm not going to let you say that because me personally, I'm the truth czar. And because it doesn't follow my line of thinking, I'm not going to allow it to go forward. So I have a major problem with anybody doing that. I think it should be left up to responsible adults to hear this and make their own decision. And this just happens to be on the coronavirus. But it could be on anything, right? It could be on faith. It could be, look, if there's 30,000 YouTube videos on why it's great to be a Muslim, I'm not going to be the guy that says take those down, even though I believe nothing in the Muslim faith. Right? As a matter of fact, I think the Muslim, if you die as a Muslim, you're going to spend an eternity in hell. So I am vastly opposed to that, but I'm not opposed to them having the right to put it up and have it go out to the world or the country, whoever's listening to it, and then let the people that read it make a decision as to whether or not they want to believe it. It's a diverse opinion that everybody that's a responsible, mature adult should be able to go through that information and they digest it and make a determination whether it's right or wrong for them.
I do think it's interesting what videos they're choosing to blacklist. So as you were talking, I just hopped on my iPad, hopped on YouTube, and I searched flat Earth.
Yeah.
And there's hundreds of videos of people explaining why the Earth is flat. Right?
Yeah.
Those aren't blacklisted. Those are still up. Everything's okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Why one and not the other? I mean, if we're going to just talk about misinformation, come on.
Right.
It's a political push. It's an agenda push is what that is, right? I'm pretty sure if I searched fake moon landing, I'd get hundreds of videos on why the moon landing was fake.
You mean that wasn't done in Hollywood?
No, it was. You didn't the flag. It's got a shadow. But like, come on, like, you know what I mean? It's all of this is a political agenda push, and that's what it really is.
So let me.
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so let me say, I totally agree. It's obviously a political, push, agenda push. And I agree with Bob, what Bob said about, not being able to, make the choice for yourself, I think is the most troubling thing. But I guess what I would say is, so would either of you like to see, obviously it's not going to happen, but would you like to see the government interject in a situation like that and say, nope, you can't take those down. This is a public forum.
Yes. My answer is yes.
Yeah, and yeah, my answer is also yes, and I'll give you a little bit more detail. So, long before you guys were born, AT&T.
What year are we talking about?
We're probably.
I just want to.
Yeah, you weren't born either, Joe.
Okay, that's all I want to know.
I think this goes back to the '60s, right? So AT&T was known as Ma Bell. They were the only phone company in the United States of America.
Okay.
Right? And when you made a long distance, check this out, guys. So if I made a long distance phone call from Buffalo, New York to Scottsdale, Arizona, right? It could be $15 a minute. Nowhere else. If I want to talk to anybody in Arizona, I had no choice. AT&T got to charge whatever they wanted to charge.
Did you call the lady at the switchboard to patch you into Scottsdale?
I'm not that old, okay?
Just checking.
I'm not that old. I didn't say, hey, Sarah, ring me through to my brother. But so what did the United States do? They determined that this was a monopoly, which it was, and they broke Ma Bell up into a whole pile of smaller telephone companies, right? And that allowed new entities to come on to start their own business and go up against Ma Bell. And we had one, Rochester Telephone, Frontier today. I mean, there's a lot of companies across the country that cropped up because Ma Bell was no longer held the thumb over all of the telephone communications in the country. And the United States government did that through the legal process and then the judiciary, who determine, and still does this today. They will determine if an organization is a monopoly, and if it is, and if it's against the benefit of the American people, they will break it up. So I'm against what's taking place with YouTube and Twitter and all these guys. And one of the ways that I would think about firing back is to break it up, right? Is to make it smaller, so that you're not beholden to a sole company to get your message out. And I think that the government in this case can do some good by doing that. Now, there's an Article 230 or Section 230 in the FCC rules that essentially says that right now government can't touch these guys, right? They can allow stuff to go through and block other stuff, and they've got the freedom to do that. And there are some conservatives in Congress that want to change that. It started with Trump, right, who said, we really need to have an open dialogue, and you're knocking that down. We need to change this Section 230, whatever it's called in the FCC regulations, and I think that would be a good thing. When I look at Amazon shutting down Parler, first you have Apple shutting down Parler's app, and then you got Google. Might have been reversed. Might have been Google first. They shut down the Droid app. And initially I'm saying, well, that's okay, because I'm a Parler guy now, right? I said, that's okay. I can still do the web version of it. Next thing you know, Amazon shuts down their servers to Parler, simply because they didn't want them on there. They didn't like the fact that there was freedom of speech for a conservative point of view, and they just didn't like the fact that Parler wasn't doing enough oversight into individual posts. They call them parlays. On that site, and so they yanked them from being able to have anybody communicate on them. I am so against that, because it's a breach of the freedom of speech. Look, if I'm a Parler guy and I say to you, Joe, and you're a liberal guy, I say, get on Parler, you're going to really enjoy it, and you look at it and you say, you know what, I can't stand this site. There's too much pro-Trump stuff, there's too much conservative stuff, too much Christian stuff. Click. Delete the app.
That's it.
Delete the app. It's over. And they talk about, there was comments on Parler about this January 6th thing in Washington, D.C., and somebody made the comment smarter than me that said this: do you realize that most every subversive attack anywhere in the world, United States or otherwise, it is primarily done through the phone. The phone, not email, right? Not Parler, YouTube, Twitter, any of those types of Facebook, any of those types of entities. It's over the telephone, because it's still pretty much it's the second most private way to communicate. Well, do we hear anybody saying to Apple or Google, you got to yank your phones? You can't use your phone anymore because your phone's been used to do this or do that, and it's bad, right? No, they didn't. And so when you have people decide that they're the ones that are going to tell you what truth is and what truth isn't, when you have people telling you, I'm going to only allow you to hear this side of the story and not that side of the story, basically you're saying, I'm going to put you back through K through 12, right? Because we've only got, we're gonna limit you to what you learn when you're inside these school walls, and it's devastating to the freedom of a nation. It's devastating to our freedoms as individuals, and ultimately the freedoms of our nation. So I'm just against any of it. Look, it doesn't, freedom of speech, as some justice said years and years ago, doesn't give you the right to yell fire in the midst of a movie theater, right? So that everybody splits out. That's not freedom of speech. But freedom of speech is the right given to us by the framers of the Constitution to say, this is what I believe.
Right.
That's all. This is what I believe. I may never change your mind, but why can't my thoughts go out there? And if my thoughts are evil, if they're egregious in some way, if they're heinous in some way, all right, you know what? I'm going to wind up with fewer and fewer and fewer people listening to me, okay, because I'm an idiot with those things. But don't squelch my freedom of speech unless it gets to the point where I'm yelling fire, right? I'm yelling fire in a crowded auditorium where that's not right. If I'm coming out and I'm saying, I'm going to kill you, right? Well, that if it requires the police to get involved, that's a different story. But other than that, if we're talking about a political difference, if we're talking about a religious difference, if we're talking about an economic difference, like I believe capitalism, while it's got its flaws, is the best system on the planet Earth. And you disagree with that, and you think that you should take my money and give it to somebody that doesn't have as much as I do simply because you think Robin Hood is the right way to go through life, the Robin Hood type of story, that's fine. Go ahead, think that way, right? But don't stop me from saying I think you should be rewarded for your work. And if your boss who took his limited income resources when it started to start a company, and he took his chances on his ideas, and it grows and grows and grows, and he wants the majority of the money that his company is making, go for it is what I say. If I think that I'm an employee and I'm not making what I should because he's taking too much off the top, then let me go find another job.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, Brian, did you have anything follow up on that YouTube thing?
No, not particularly anything that hasn't been already said.
So what do you think about breaking up YouTube or breaking up Twitter or Facebook into smaller, much more localized companies where they don't have to all go by the mantra of Big Daddy, and secondly, allowing other people that don't need millions and millions and millions of dollars to upstart a competitive company, gives them the opportunity to get into the game.
Yeah, I don't see that as something that would be beneficial, so much as what I would see would be if they're classified by the United States government as a platform, right? An open platform for anybody to post their ideas on, then that needs to be enforced. And if that's not enforced, then they should face the proper fines that would come along with that. If Twitter or Facebook or YouTube were a publisher and their statements, or is it publisher, like the New York Times, for example,
okay.
like they could say what they want to say as the New York Times, as an entity who has an opinion.
I was going to say, you're talking about an opinion.
An opinion,
right?
Or, right, like let's say Vanity Fair, right? Like Vanity Fair can come at you from a specific angle, and that's a part of their business model, and that's the way it's supposed to be. But that also comes with certain legal rights and stipulations as far as that magazine goes. Whereas YouTube and Twitter, as a platform, they're not supposed to be able to censor people because of what they're. And this goes back to was it Section 230?
Yeah.
It moves back into that that kind of conversation. So I don't think that they should be broken up per se. I think that they should be held to the standard that they signed up for. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't think that we're going to have Twitter is meant to be a global conversation, right? It's meant to connect people from the United States to, France, in the United States to, Italy, wherever, you name a place. We're supposed to be able to have short conversations. I've had a conversation with Anderson Cooper on Twitter.
Okay.
Pretty neat.
Yeah.
I would not be able to have that conversation on another platform.
Right.
This was years ago. I said something about his show, and he responded to me, and I responded to him, and he responded one more time, and that was that.
Yeah.
How do I do that if Twitter is a Rochester-based company and it's just? Do you know what I mean? I think the benefit is good, of having it be global. I just think that they need to be held accountable to their own standards.
Well, let me just clear one thing up. When Ma Bell got broken up by the U.S. government,
Yeah.
all telephone entities, big or small, got to use the same copper across the country. Okay?
Sure.
So it wasn't like Rochester Tel couldn't get through to, San Jose Tel.
Sure.
AT&T had to share all their communication lines, so they were still all available to everybody.
I mean, I think we have the opportunity right now, right? Like you could start a Twitter if you wanted to, of sorts, or I mean, I don't know if you had the money to to start something like that. And I think there are enough people who are conservatives that have that kind of cash flow to be able to start something like that. Again, I think more on the legal side of it. If you're gonna say that as a publisher or a platform, right, that you're an open platform for people to share your ideas, then that's what it needs to be. That's just what it needs to be. And if they go against that, then the government has the right to attack that through laws. So
Because would we all agree that Twitter, Facebook, Amazon, that they all had the right to do what they did? Apple, Google, that they all had the right to do what they did?
to take Parler off?
Yeah.
No.
Well, I think they did because they're all private enterprises.
Okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, just to give you an example, I don't have a problem if our local grocery store says you got to wear a mask to come into my store.
Okay.
Got no problem with that, right? Because they own that. They can tell me if they want to tell me I got to wear a mask. I got to wear a mask. I'll find a grocery store that doesn't make me wear a mask, and I'll go shop there if this one exists, right? But when the government says you got to wear a mask, see, I got a problem with that.
I think I'd have to look more into, like, for example, Amazon Web Services was what hosted Parler.
Right, correct.
I would like to see on Amazon Web Services, terms and agreements
So according to them,
where the violation took place and go from there.
okay, but according to them, they said Parler broke the contract.
Do you know where?
I don't know where.
Okay.
I don't
Sure.
know where, but I mean that's what they used
Okay.
to do it, right? Because
Sure.
it was a legal document
Okay, sure.
to have Parler as part of their service, and they cut them off because they said they broke the agreement, and that was the argument Parler had. We didn't break the agreement, right?
Sure.
We're doing everything that we said that we would do. Well, guys, look, it's been an hour and a quarter, and we really thank you for your time today. Do you have either Tyler or Brian? Do you have anything you want to close out with? Because you're more than welcome to do that.
I don't have anything else specifically, but I just want to say I appreciate you guys having us on the show. Appreciate you guys standing up for Christ on this show and standing up for conservative opinions. And like I said, just thanks for having us on.
You're welcome, Tyler.
Yeah, absolutely. Brian really killed it right there. I agree. Like, you guys are doing an awesome job. Thanks for the opportunity to be on and share our thoughts.
Well, listen, we are really thankful that you guys took time out of your day today. I know, even though it's a Sunday, I know it can be a busy day, and so we're very, very grateful for you being here, for your sharing your opinions, for yourself personally, and for your age group. So may the Lord bless you guys richly, and have a blessed rest of the Lord's Day.
Thanks, guys.
Hey,
Thank you very much.
Okay, bye-bye.
You too. Bye.
Well, thank you for tuning into this episode of Faith and Freedom. And if you would like to continue to hear content like this, please subscribe to the channel, share it with as many people as possible, and comment in the section below. We would appreciate to hear back from you. Thanks, and have a great week.